this is my first time in South Carolina. And the only time I was in North Carolina was in Raleigh. And I have to say, it's quite beautiful here. I had no idea. So actually thinking that I found a state that rivals the state I'm from, which is Idaho. So as I mentioned, I'm from Idaho. That's the state with the star on it. Generally, when I tell people that I'm from Idaho, their response is, oh, Iowa? Oh, no, not Iowa. And then, oh, Ohio. Nope, again, it's Idaho. And then they generally say the Midwest. And so I felt like it's just easier if I have a picture with the state in which I'm from on it. But as mentioned, I'm with PagerDuty. I'm a DevOps advocate. I'm also one of the organizers of Devops Days Boise, and an organizer of DeliveryConf, which we just had our very first DeliveryConf in Seattle this year. And then I'm a contributor to opensource.com. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about why you can't buy DevOps, but how people will try to sell it to you. So systems are complex. And that is what really drives that need for DevOps now. And we hear this a lot. We hear digital transformation and DevOps transformation. And a lot of the reasons that drive companies to that is because of the competitive advantage. We can no longer just sit and be comfortable with where we are in the industry. We have to constantly innovate. There was a study that PagerDuty did, a state of digital operations in the UK in 2017, that showed that consumers, 86% of consumers will only wait under a minute for an unresponsive app or website. And out of that, 68% of those consumers will leave and never come back. And so that's driving a lot of the change that we talk about, which has completely kind of changed the market and brought all of these new tools. And I'm sure that people are familiar with this picture of DevOps. But what we talk about and what we see is that making these cultural changes in this organizational shift, it doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. Change is hard. Change is scary. Change is involved. And when making any type of transformation, it does require support from the top. With DevOps, though, that's one where you can really have a bottoms-up approach because it's really a change to your culture. So I had a little fun. I'm going to take off my watch here because it's buzzing a lot. I shouldn't have had that on. Put that in my pocket so it doesn't buzz on the stage. So the definition of DevOps, 9 million results. I was recently in Ghent at Devops Days Belgium, and I asked Patrick Dubois, Patrick, can you please give me a definition of DevOps? Because it would be great to put in my talk. And his answer was no. It's not up to him to define DevOps. So I'm going to show you a couple of definitions of DevOps out of those 9 million results. We're not going to go through all of them, just a couple. So we've got our Wikipedia definition, which is a set of practices that combines software development and information technology and aims to shorten the system's development lifecycle and provides continuous delivery with high software quality. And then we have our opensource.com definition, which is DevOps is a word that is used to describe a set of modern IT practices which seek to more closely bring together software developers and operations staff to work on the same project in a more collaborative manner. And then I'm not going to read this super long one from AWS. But again, we are talking about the combination of cultural philosophies and practices and tools, and again, high velocity. So what we can see out of those 3 samples of the 9 million results there is that we're still talking about culture, collaboration, and high quality software. So this talk was actually born out of the fact that one day I was hanging out at the computer and I saw a DevOps self-assessment, and I was like, ooh, I should take that. And so I went down this rather long rabbit hole of taking multiple DevOps self-assessments. And did you know that in between 10 and 15 questions, an organization can tell you how mature you are on your DevOps journey? Yeah, it's very simple. I mean, we're talking 5 minutes. And with the exception of one of these self-assessments, what I found was these self-assessments were designed so that I would give the wrong answer. There were oftentimes no correct answer, and it was always because it had to do with what that product could give to me to make me DevOps on my journey. It was really frustrating that there was no right answer, and then just like what happened after I got a bunch of socks at AWS reInvent from a lot of vendors, I also started getting a lot of phone calls from salespeople because clearly I needed help on my journey. This is the assessment that is the exception to the rule, this Microsoft DevOps self-assessment. There are 2 versions that you can do. There's a 20-minute short version and a 40-minute long version. And the reason that this assessment is great is because it asks relevant questions. And it has all of the optional answers, including not applicable. But my favorite part was on the results page, when you go in depth into your results, there are links that point to open source resources and readings that teach you how to go on your DevOps journey and teach you the areas that you're low in instead of trying to sell you Azure. And I was really impressed by that. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much people tell you, it turns out that you cannot change culture with a credit card. It's investment in time, in people, in culture. What was it? Somebody was saying the other day, we just recently had our SKO, and somebody was saying, if anybody tells you that their transformation or their migration is going to take 2 years, add a 0 to that. Because it's just not a transaction. So I'd love to just quickly talk, since we're back to the basics, talk a little bit more about what is DevOps and what it's not. So let's start with what it's not. It turns out that DevOps is not just moving to the cloud. Don't know if you know that. Just because you've moved to the cloud doesn't make you DevOps. Cloud is a portion of being DevOps now, but moving there doesn't just make you a DevOps organization. Also, having a siloed DevOps team, you have this team, they're DevOps, they're in another building, they're on another floor, they don't talk to anybody else. That's really not DevOps. It's kind of the whole collaboration and removing silos. Kicking the ops team out, just getting rid of them. Goodbye, ops. That is not DevOps, and that's one of the things. I used to work for a consulting company, and that's one of the things we used to hear a lot is, well, we'll just get rid of that department. And then a checklist. DevOps is not a checklist. It's not, here are your 10 steps, and you check all of these things off, and there you are DevOps certified. And we're not even going to get into DevOps certifications, okay? Because DevOps certifications, how can we certify on something that nobody can agree on a definition of? DevOps also, again, it's not quick. It's not the push of a button. It's not purchasing a tool, and because you have that tool, you are now an official DevOps organization with a stamp of approval. But let's talk a little bit about what it does mean to be a DevOps organization. Ultimately, DevOps is about people over processes. One of my favorite books, and if you haven't read it, it's available on audiobook. Anybody can be lulled to sleep by Nicole Forsgren, and I only say that because I tend to listen to it on plane, and then I accidentally fall asleep. It's really a fascinating book, is Accelerate. And so we're going to talk about a few of the things out of the Accelerate book, including the Westrum cultural model. So when we talk about culture, this is oftentimes the model that that we refer to. So who here in this room is familiar with this model of organizational culture? All right, good. So it's going to be okay to go through it then. I always hate it when everybody raises their hand. Well, so there are three types of cultural models within organizations that we talk about. The first is pathological. So pathological organizations, they're very power-oriented by leaders. Information is currency in these types of organizations. Information is power. It's not widely shared, and when it is, it's shared to a specific individuals, keeping people in their places because that information is power. There's really low cooperation because there's no trust in these organizations. Messengers oftentimes get shot. People don't want to take responsibilities because you don't know what could happen. Failure leads to scapegoating. We're going to talk a little bit about blameless cultures here soon. And then we talk about bureaucratic organizations, and you oftentimes see the bureaucratic model in financial services institutions and government institutions. The bureaucratic model, it's not necessarily wrong, it's just maybe not the best way to go about things, and it's a very much so, you have your job, you do your job, I'm gonna do my job, you're gonna stay in your lane, and we're gonna have a lot of processes. We're gonna make sure everything just happens by the book. You'll see, oftentimes you see a lot of ITIL organizations in this very bureaucratic model. You have your responsibilities, and failure, again, blaming for failure. And then the generative model, which is the model that we really want to work towards. And that model on the generative side is really oriented towards performance and towards the mission and the business outcomes. And people understand what their goals are. There's a lot of cooperation. Messengers are welcomed. You don't shoot the messenger. You want to know what's going on in your organization. Risks are shared. Failure is celebrated. And we heard that yesterday. We heard that a little bit from Jason on his Gremlin presentation. It's why we do chaos engineering, so that we can understand and learn from our failures, so that we can implement new things. And so again, Google had their findings on high-performing teams. And the number one finding of high-performing teams was psychological safety. And so that's can we take the risk without feeling insecure or embarrassed? And dependable. Can we work together and can we complete our goals on time? And people have structure and clarity. They know what their outcomes are that they're supposed to have. They're clear about the outcomes of the business. They're clear about the mission. People find meaning in their work. They're excited about what they do. And they know the impact that they have. And they're bought into the impact as an individual. And so when we talk about the generative model, we look at being collaborative. We're sharing ideas. And the best part of that is, as I mentioned, everybody in the organization understands the mission of that organization, and they're bought into it. And they want to work together because information is shared. It's not kept in silos. And when we do that, that's when we see the cooperation and the focus on performance, and bridging is encouraged, and that communication is there. Now, going back to psychological safety, the number one skill of high-performing teams, it's a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe, that they're safe taking risks. It's practicing empathy. It's empowering individuals on your team and showing a high level of trust. Now, earlier this week, I was in Napa at our company, SKO, and Colonel Nicole, I cannot pronounce her last name, so Nicole came in and talked to us. She is the first female Thunderbird pilot. I mean, she is amazing, but she talked to us from an Air Force fighter pilot perspective about trust. And she was able to actually relate that back to what we do in tech. It was really quite amazing. She's a very good speaker if you ever have a chance to see any of her things. But when you look at flying this formation at 500 miles an hour, the planes, they have 3 feet on the top, 3 feet below, 3 feet each side wiggle room. That's about trust. And she said that when you join the Thunderbirds, the trust is just, it's there. It's expected to have it. It took her a while to understand that you just have to trust people. And she talked about that trust starts with ourselves. When we trust that we're doing the best work and that we're committed to the goals of the team, it's much easier to trust other people. And it's easier to share that trust with other people. And trust does need to be given within our organizations, because that's how you're able to not crash at flying 500 miles an hour with 3 feet of wiggle room. That allows employees to be productive because they're focusing on getting their work done instead of wondering, what is Jason doing over there on his computer? Is he playing Tetris? Instead of focusing so much on somebody else, they're focused on being productive and solving the problem at hand because they're in a safe space. And if they have a question, they can say something and they can ask somebody. And that's where you get the risks being shared. And people are okay speaking up, and we start moving towards that generative model. And then we talk about embracing failures. We heard about from chaos engineering yesterday. We heard a little bit about this from Aaron as well. It's okay to fail. We don't want to shoot the messenger. There was a study, and it's Amy, and I cannot remember her name, a professor from Harvard. At the moment, it's slipping my mind. She, the whole psychological safety, that came from a study that was done on emergency rooms. Is anybody familiar with this? So in emergency rooms with high psychological safety, they found that more mistakes were reported. More mistakes in, the wrong medication, the wrong treatment. And it wasn't because in emergency rooms with high psychological safety, they were like, hey, it's okay, we just dole out the medicine to whoever we want. But it's because they felt safe talking about their mistakes. And guess what? When you feel safe talking about your mistakes, especially in emergency room situations, less people die. Okay, now not all of our jobs are life and death, but when we talk about mistakes that we make and when we celebrate those, then we can innovate faster. And so I'm going to get on a soapbox for a minute and talk about the words that we use. And I think you may have already heard this. Root cause. Who uses the term root cause? So again, this is my soapbox moment. Root cause. The reason that we try to talk about moving away from that term and moving towards the term contributing factors is because root cause points to one person. You were the root cause. If I accidentally hit the back button on my mouse, is it because the root cause is it's me, it's my fault, I can't hit the right button? Or maybe the contributing factors are that it wasn't designed right. Maybe the back button is too close. Maybe it's not the right size. If I was able to fat finger code and take down AWS East, am I the root cause of that? Well, I guess we could look at it that way. Or are there contributing factors, and were there things in place that allowed that to happen? And so we talk a lot about this at PagerDuty in the form of blameless postmortems, and we could go on for days about that. But think about the words that you're using. And so basically, to get off my soapbox here, think about using contributing factors instead of root cause, because at the end of the day, we want failure to lead to questions and failure to lead to innovation instead of failure to lead to fear that I am the problem and I am the root cause. I guess I got back on my soapbox there really quick. And then we talk about clear and simple defined processes. Oftentimes processes have so many steps. They're so complicated. They're not well defined. Not everybody knows knows about them, knows where to find them, knows how to follow them. And so when you're looking at what will help you in a DevOps model, it's having very clear, very simple, defined processes, not having a huge, heavyweight change management process. Okay, looking at how we can make change management more lightweight, easier. That will help us get to our deploys faster and our changes. Because when we do that, things get implemented. We're able to be more competitive in our advantage. And so just to kind of bring it all back to this little slide, which is not a timeline, even though it looks like a timeline because it's kind of built like one, it isn't. DevOps, when we talk about DevOps transformation, a lot of times we're talking about releasing on demand and delivery teams owning their services. Because if you've built something, shouldn't you be the one that owns it? Shouldn't you be the subject matter expert if something goes wrong with it? Or should it be somebody else on the SRE team that has to take that call and be responsible for the service that you built? So we want to empower teams to own their services. We want to automate as much as possible and optimize. The job is never done. And companies are not going to get 100% of the way there. Most of them aren't. And again, it's a multi-year journey. A huge transformation doesn't happen in 2 years. And if it does, power to you and get up on stage and tell us all how you did it. And so when we look at the different types of companies, and one of these may fit yours that are going through a DevOps or a digital transformation, again, this kind of goes back to the Western cultural model that we were talking about, right? So companies that are thinking about it, they're very ITIL-oriented. Some teams may be starting to adopt. Failure leads to scapegoating, versus where we have these hybrid organizations that we talk about now, where maybe something was built in this new DevOps model, but we still have the traditional model. And so it's generally a combination of that ITIL practice and those DevOps practices. New development is done in DevOps. Failure leads to more justice, but again, it's still kind of pointing fingers. And then DevOps elite or high-performing teams, or really whatever you want to call it, they're releasing on demand. They have a primary SRE DevOps model. Ownership, the services are owned by those who built it, and you're learning from failure. So some of the practices that can help you get there: configuration management. You need to have strong configuration management to properly automate. It's important. It gives you the ability to scale your infrastructure. It establishes and maintains the consistency across your product. We've already talked a bit about automation. Automate everything you can automate. Automate your tests. If you can automate, it's going to, again, ensure that consistency. And it's going to take away the time that you have to manually do all of these things. And tooling. Tooling actually needs to be useful. Decisions on tools should actually be made by the teams that will be using those tools. Tooling, I know, shocker, right? Tooling decisions shouldn't just be pushed down from executives saying, okay, we bought Snow, you're going to use it. Because otherwise, it's not useful, it doesn't get implemented, and it turns out that there are a lot of tools out there. You do not have to buy them all. I was recently in New Zealand, and I was talking to somebody from a company that shall go unnamed because we do have salespeople here, and they said, if a salesperson comes to us with a new tool, we buy it. Okay, that's great. I'll pass that on to PagerDuty. But You don't need to buy all the tools that are out there. What you need to do are understand the ones that are going to be useful for you in that phase of your journey. And you need to talk to the teams that will be using those tools. And you need to understand what tools you already have. And are you even using those tools to the best of their ability? Do you understand all of the functionality? And then we talk about continuous integration, right? Are you working in branches for months? Or are you working in short, small branches, and are you continuously releasing that so that you can roll things back if you need to? You're deploying in small chunks of code instead of releasing an entire tree at a time. And testing. I mean, I don't feel like I have to say much on this slide, but testing, it's a thing. It should be done. It should be done before every release. It should be done often. Testing should be automated. Test, test, test. And if I could make a suggestion, start small. If you're looking at implementing DevOps in your organization, heck, if you're looking at bringing in a new tool, if you're looking at trying something new, like maybe owning your services as a team, maybe going on call, whatever it is, you can start with a small team. Start with greenfield services. Start with something easy. Prove out that success so that you can make that business case, so you can show that return on investment, because that's how you manage up. That's how you can affect change from the bottom. You prove success. And when you do that, you'll see that DevOps and this cultural change and these new methodologies, they'll infect your entire organization. Because when other teams see that your team is being successful, that you're being successful, that people are happy, that people are celebrating failures, they're going to want in on that. They're not going to try to be like, no, we do not want to be part of that team over there. They're having way too much fun. We want to sit over here and we want to be by ourselves. They're going to want to be part of it. And so be willing to mentor, be willing to help other teams on their journey, allow them to shadow you, share the practices, how you make your decisions. Because to bring it back, and this is from Dora, most organizations wanting to adopt DevOps look for a set of prescriptive steps or best practices to guide their journey. But every organization is different. All of your organizations are in different stages. So it depends on the state of your technology, your current culture, what processes you do or you do not have in place, and your short and long-term goals. And also, just one more thing that I didn't say on processes. Make sure that you own your processes and that they don't own you. Make sure that your processes make sense for your organization and that you don't just have them in place because, Joe said so 5 years ago and we're still doing what Joe said. Make sure you understand why you have these processes and that they can change if need be. And then just to let you know, if anybody wants to be a talkie person, like myself, we have some talkie people, some DevOps advocate positions open. Here's the link if anybody is interested, remote. And then you can also go to pagerduty.com/careers because we are hiring.